No
Yep,
others.
perfect. Okay. So while everyone's getting situated, I wanted to just take a moment to introduce what this meeting is, just to ground all of us real quick. So this is the Climate Crisis Response Committee meeting, which is the committee that reports to the board. It's a community committee, and our goal here is to oversee the implementation of the climate crisis response, climate justice, and sustainable practices policy, and report to the board progress updates on how the district is doing in implementing that. And I'll just really quickly share that my name is Kat Davis, and I'm the advisor for climate justice here at PPS. So I'm the staff person here to support this committee. And once everybody gets logged in, we can go around and do introductions to make sure that, yeah, we're able to all be on the same page. And so if you go to, yeah, perfect. No. It just takes a minute for them to accept the invitation. Hope everybody's enjoying the sun.
Want me to stay muted?
Yeah, and then if you have your camera on, then I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen so we can all see each other for introductions. Great.
Okay.
Perfect.
Welcome everybody. Can you hear me? Okay. Let's start the meeting. Sorry, it's a little bit late. We're having problems with Wi-Fi over here. I'll just start by introducing myself. I'm Jane Como, the chair of the Climate Crisis Response Committee, and a PPS parent. And I'll pass it to Diane to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Diane Riley. Happy to be here, and I use she, her pronouns. I'll pass it to Charity.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Charity Fain, also a PPS parent of 2 kids, and happy to be here as well. I'll pass it on to Eric.
Hi, everybody. Yes, Eric. Also, I'm on the committee and also a PPS parent. And to Angela.
Angela Long. I am a PPS parent as well. She, her pronouns.
Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Hannah Scott. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm the PPS Climate Justice Project Coordinator.
And Kat, I don't know. I guess, did you introduce yourself at the beginning?
Yeah, and I can round this off again and just say that I'm the, my name is Kat Davis. I'm the climate justice advisor here at Portland Public Schools, and my role is to oversee the district side of the implementation of the climate crisis response, climate justice, and sustainable practices policy.
Thank you. Okay, well, the first item on the agenda is Kat is going to talk about
I'll share
the dashboard that she sent out, and hopefully folks had a chance to look over before the meeting.
Yeah, I am just navigating, sharing my screen so we can go through that together. There it is. Okay, so you should all be able to see, yes, the slide. And just to give a quick overview of the agenda. So we'll go through the progress dashboard that I've been putting together to share the updates on the progress. And I really appreciated everyone's input on creating this. We had a chance to look it over. And I put some work into it since you might have seen it when it was first shared. So I apologize if this looks drastically different than what you saw, because this afternoon I got to have some time to work on this. But there's a couple different sheets here that I'll review really quickly and then go into what all of this means. So this first sheet is just kind of the policy overview of how we are approaching progress towards implementation at this point, with kind of a high level plan, a high level timeline, and then approach to community engagement and centering frontline communities as of FY23, fiscal year 23, and then 2023. And then I do have this spreadsheet that it goes into actual progress on different policy strands and initiatives. The way that I put this together is, I'll share really quickly. The last one is the overall kind of goals and objectives. And so this sheet breaks down every policy goal and sub goal related to each of the 3 pillars by line item and kind of which department most closely oversees that work. So the thing is that all of our strands of, not all, most of our strands of work at PPS encompass more than one objective or sub goal. I'm going to call them sub goals for consistency. Shane and I got into this of like, what are we talking about? So sub goals. So what I did, instead of creating a progress dashboard where it had every single sub goal listed with all the different work that touches it, since a lot of the work touches multiple sub goals, I created this dashboard that has the strands of work. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit so that you can see it better, even though it's going to be hard to read. You have a link in the you'll have a link in the agenda so people can follow along on their own computers. But basically it talks about within this goal, we have these different strands of work, scopes of work that we're working on, such as a decarbonization implementation plan for the district. It has a stage or a phase. I'm going to call this a phase for consistency. We're editing in real time. Anyways, I'll edit that in a second. So what phase of this implementation that we're on for that strand of work, whether that work is on task or if it needs clarification from the committee or some thought partnership, or if there's any barriers, then we would indicate that as well. Or whether it's complete, which is great to have some things that are already like our first year goals are done. And then I had this category that says connection to sub goals. So these are all the different sub goals within that this list that strand connects to. So the decarbonization implementation plan connects to like a lot of things in the policy, but primarily pillar 1 goals. So you'll see a lot of the pillar 1 sub goals outlined here. And then it has anticipated project completion date, which a lot of this is something that is going to, when we work closer with staff to identify how all this works together, that will probably get updated as we go. And then a quick just kind of overview of what this strand of work is and how it relates to the policy goals. So especially since in the last couple climate crisis response committee meetings, what has been really exciting, it seems like, is hearing directly from staff about the actual work that we're doing to like kind of help implement and guide this. I thought this would be the best way to show like this is the actual work that we're doing to like try and bring this forward. And then that work, some of this work will carry on next year. Some work next year will be new projects and strands of work depending on what we learned this year and the goals, the evaluation metrics and indicators that we are working on with our contractor Eco Northwest to actually create those like data indicator progress metric points, because that's been one of our challenges, is trying to quantify how do you measure progress on some of these goals. And so they're helping us with that. So all that being said, this is the dashboard thus far. There is a couple parts that we wanted to point out specifically. I think the main one was just to align expectations around what we're learning. And this will be, I think, hopefully a role of this committee is as we talked about this earlier together, as we implement this policy, there's certain parts that we're going to find, I don't want to call them like conflicts, but just like some tensions in how we implement the policy, different kind of stumbling blocks as we start to understand and identify how different work moves across. This one wasn't necessarily a stumbling block, but we learned that our investment reporting to the board, which is under, I'm just going to go over this one thing and then I'll open this up for some feedback just to give you an idea of how this can work. under policy goal 2, boop, boop, boop. Where did it go? Okay, here it is. Goal 1, pillar 1, goal 5, subject or sub goal 3. Good old policy talk. It says that PPS will report at least annually of PPS investments in fossil fuels with information that in light of state mandated investments is reasonably accessible and available to it. Investments in state investment funds will be reported, recognizing that the state treasury controls and decision-making for state investment funds. And so what we learned was that we're due to another board policy, and I think the state policy in general, we're not allowed to invest directly in fossil fuels. So we can't directly invest in like a coal mining production, though our investments may be in companies that in part oversee or are directly involved in extraction of fossil fuels. And so we wanted to, that was a point of clarification that would be great to discuss as we start to interpret what this policy means in implementation of like how is it that we can best interpret and put parameters on how to define what that means. For instance, investments in fossil fuels, so we can provide guidance to our investment team to be able to then give us a report of that, because that was something that they were confused about. And then also recognizing that we already have an investment report that is provided to the board for board policy quarterly. And so seeing, is there an opportunity to just highlight certain things in that reporting structure that already exists, or do we need to have a different reporting structure specifically for this policy? So that's an example of how this policy progress dashboard can be used to like elevate different things that staff, as we are implementing and interpreting what this policy looks like on the ground, might have some opportunities for clarification that we would love to invite you all as thought partners in, as folks that are really engaged in the interpretation of this policy from the perspective of the community. I'm gonna go ahead and stop talking for a moment to just open this up to any questions, comments, concerns, ideas. If you want to discuss anything specifically, I would also love to open that up as well.
Well, I'll start by saying I like what I see in the improvements you made today, Kat. I like the way that you added that column for cross-referencing. I mean, it's just kind of interesting to scan it and see like how interconnected things are. And I'm looking forward to reading that statement that you added about community engagement in frontline communities, because that was something that I felt was not highlighted enough currently in this working document. So it's great to pull out some specific information around that, and because it probably, I mean, maybe there'll be specific things for different goals and sub goals, but there's also some like broad, like cross-cutting activities, I'm guessing. So that's good. Yeah.
I would also love to say I just really appreciated, Jane and I had a chance to talk about this dashboard previously, and I just really appreciated that calling out of where do we see the like that focus on frontline communities in this work, because that helped me think about like, oh, how, like just because something feels intrinsic to like, oh, I understand this, but like making sure that that's really spelled out and elevated. So I really appreciated that feedback. And as we're developing evaluation metrics with Echo Northwest, they've done a really great job of already highlighting like ways that we can be really pulling out data and focusing specifically on impacts to not only like local frontline communities and underserved communities, but at a larger like regional and global scale as well. So I'm really excited to see how that continues to progress. I'm hoping to have a more comprehensive update of that in May, but I think that being able to have our progress metrics really well encompass those goals will be helpful in being able to show how each of these different areas have different external impacts in different ways. So yeah,
I wondered that reminds me of a question I had was, where's Echo Northwest contract? And I wondered, is that like the administrative directive? Is that part of their work? Or?
That's a great question. I thought I included it in the administrative parts, so apologies for that. I'll go through and add that. So Oh, I think okay, so it's actually really under the create a public facing dashboard to track policy progress. So it's this description
Okay.
of materials
Okay.
mentions defining metrics for measuring progress on policy objectives, but I think I will go through and actually call out that contract specifically because that's a scope of work that we're currently doing that will wrap up in June. And that will result in the ability to create the dashboard, which I believe would really happen over the summer. So it's more of a next, like an FY24 strand of work anyways. So thank you for asking.
And then, so the consultant for the administrative directive, that's in progress right now. You have someone under contract and is working on that?
That was, no, actually, that was language that was included in this high level goals and objectives from that was put together before I got here. And I don't actually, thank you for, I didn't even notice that it said using consultant. I don't think that we will use a consultant for that. I think we're working on that internally to put together the directive.
But you are doing one, because I recall like back in the fall, this is a bit of PPS lingo that I know a little bit about from
just
like the past couple of years.
this
It's often for PPS policy, this is my understanding. Policy is like kind of the board's working document, and then staff creates an administrative directive, which provides the more detail on how like staff roles and responsibilities and for staff kind of managing of a policy. But, and I remember there was discussion that there wasn't going to be one for this policy, but it sounds like it's back on the table.
Yes, it is. And that might have been I had just misunderstood. I think because I think that was me who said, I don't know that we're going to have one. And I think that was me misunderstanding kind of what the goal was, to see what needed to mobilize within the district in order to best fulfill the policy goals, like what kinds of questions were we going to have that a directive would help us work through to best implement the policy. So now that I also learned the lingo, I've been that's one of the goals for is to put that together. Ideally to be able to present with the board report that I'll have in June.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that will be a public document
Mhm.
because that would be a really key document, I think,
Yeah.
for our committee as well.
Yeah, and some of the questions that have arisen that I'm hoping that document will help to clarify is when, for instance, multiple issues are happening that are related to the policy that might be, and I don't use the word in conflict with one another, but like how do we tease out like how to overcome different policy implementation questions or barriers that we're encountering? What is the process for that? Like where do people go? Where do, for instance, our contractors go and they say, okay, we're trying to construct this building and we need to weigh the importance of this, like, you know, resilience initiative versus this greenhouse gas initiative, and like where do we go to have that question answered? That's something that I'm already finding would be really helpful, is a process among like other just kind of like administrative how to implement this work kind of tasks, or
Hey,
what are
Kat,
reporting and things. Yes.
this is, sorry, it's hard to jump in on the phone. I have a recommendation going back to the dashboard that rather than just putting Eco Northwest scope in that strategy line item, that you actually describe at a high level what the work is and then put them as like the person delivering on that work or in the progress. So it's clear and easy to understand what the specific strategy is that they're accomplishing. So maybe not delete with that line that you had there.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I think I was trying to do what I should probably avoid, which is actively working on things while I'm talking, which is never a successful strategy for me. So thank you for pointing that out. I just kind of put that as a scapeholder, but I will go through and, or placeholders that I was trying to say. Yeah, so I'll just.
What other comments or questions do folks have with the dashboard?
Maybe the one when this looks great, by the way. When a couple things I think that I like sort of centering on frontline communities and getting that. I identified the other piece I was thinking on the other side of that is the unintended adverse effects on frontline communities. Is there a way of like if there's a check and balance against that, whether that's the column that goes in, because of those pop up. I can't give an example because I don't know where they show up, but if there's check and balance against each of the steps in this, that would have to column recognizes if that's been identified or shows up. Because there's two pieces to that, making sure that this work is moving that direction, but making sure like what can happen sometimes in these projects is that unintended adverse effect. So.
Hey, Eric, you're kind of cutting out on the phone. I don't know if others are having that on their end or if it's just me. Maybe it's just me, Eric. Sorry.
Yeah, it might be so we're all in the same room trying to use my laptop, and so it might be the direction that the speaker is facing. So I'll move it this way and see if that helps.
I can use my outside voice too. Is what I've been told.
Yeah, that's better for me.
What I was calling out was if there's a, because I do like highlighting like we had talked about as far as at the frontline community work that we're moving towards, but also wanted to a check and balance against any unintended adverse effects that can come across any of these processes and steps we have, but putting it somewhere in the dashboard, whether it's, I mean, it would be a lot, but a column for each of those if there's any check that's needed or something like that, because I think that would, I mean, that can happen. So that's, I think that would be a good way of qualifying that. One, we're working towards the goal of making sure they're incorporated, but there isn't anything happening in this work that would adversely affect that.
Yeah, that's great feedback. And I can think about, I can add a goal for that and then have that also be kind of a point of the questions and discussions that the teams go through that are overseeing that scope of work. Yeah. And I'll bring that to Echo Northwest too and ask about what that might look like for kind of some of their proposed indicators and outcomes already have some of that kind of incorporated. But we'll see what looks like is feasible to implement. And then there's no harm in definitely like making sure that that's like at the front of what we're doing. So that sounds great.
Okay. And the only other you had mentioned like the metrics will be coming with them over time and so that won't be just like phase 5. When I looked at that was pretty the analysis, but there'll be metrics coming in before those phases that get added to that, or how does that, where do you see that? I would assume it's going to be different depending on each of these steps. As you some data is going to be a little more lower hanging fruit than others, I assume.
Yeah, some of the data right now we're trying to identify what data we need to best articulate progress towards the policy goals, but not just like the ones that are written, but like the spirit of the policy goals. And then we're identifying internally what is readily available that we could already pull from, what is feasible that we could adopt some of these data sets into our workflow, and then what's going to be more challenging that we're going to need more resources to actually measure that data, and then what's just like not really possible given a lot of factors. And so we're at that point of mapping out. It sounds so bureaucratic, but it's the mapping out of what the map will look like, where we're trying to pinpoint, okay, we want to identify what data is going to be the most meaningful to collect to show the most progress, the most holistic progress towards these policy goals, and then creating a set of maybe a timeline of when we will have the tools to actually capture those data points that we just set as goals for measuring data. And so there's going to be scope of work that is happening like while we're in that process, but of like mapping all of this out. So that's where that analysis part comes in handy. But ideally, once we have those metrics kind of fleshed out in the systems for actually tracking that data, we'll be able to have these programs where we're like, okay, well, how do we meet that goal in that data set? And then we do the whole phases of like going through the process, the design process of coming up with a program, and then we implement it, and then we're able to analyze how that program went against the metrics that we set at this beginning stage.
So hopefully does that make sense?
Yeah, we'll get there.
Yeah. So that's my way of saying, like, over the next, this year's goal has been to identify where this work is already exists and where the gaps are and who's doing what and how can we best get our stakeholder groups together and identify the metrics that we want to set for progress tracking. And then next year's goal will be to really develop the tools for actually tracking the process progress. Yeah. So it's multifaceted.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Angela has a question.
Oh,
So
right.
you want to-
Hi, sorry, I can, Angela and Chair, okay, cool, so, what, sorry, Charity?
Yeah,
first? Oh, yeah.
so
So do you, it sounded like Charity, like, or do you mind, it doesn't matter, which, whoever goes first.
go ahead, Charity.
You had your hand up first.
Oh.
Okay. I just have a quick question. Your question, Kat, regarding comments on the dashboard, specifically, can you remind me how we will get updates and, what changes from meeting to meeting, so we don't have to go through and try to figure that out?
Can I say, I think my question follows into hers really well. When I looked at this, I thought, okay, this gives us a really good snapshot of the breadth and scope and how it ties all in, which is really good. But I think my question is similar to Angela's, but a little different in that as I look at this, not just how we're going to get updated, but as we're kind of onboarding us still onto the process, how will you really explain, I feel like for me, I need a little primer, a little like deeper explanation of each spot so that I really feel like I not just understand the high level dashboard, but if you're giving updates or we're doing check-ins through it, if I don't really understand what it is, I don't really have enough context to know if that progress is good, bad, slow, whatever. So it's, yes, Angela's, how are we going to get updated, but what are the next steps to make sure we all really understand those sections?
Can I just clarify something too? I wonder, Charity, do you feel like the desire to have a primer on all of those things, or do you think like, are there certain areas that in your mind would be a higher priority to have more info about, or is
I mean the big sections, like this is, I feel like we might all have different priorities, like based on our different interests, right? But like, I don't feel like I can say, yeah, progress is going well, other than like what your assessment is of progress going well. If I don't, I have a little more context about what the work actually is. So like, I feel like it's because we're still relatively new. We haven't had a lot of meetings. Some of us weren't involved in the policy, so we don't know what we don't know yet in some ways. So like just getting a little more information on each sections, if we went over them, then I wouldn't need that every time, right? We would have a little more orientation, I feel like, on what those are, and then would know, yeah, progress is moving or what not. Otherwise, I don't feel like I'm necessarily doing my job. I feel like I'm relying on staff 100% to tell me, yes, we're on track, which you are going to do anyway, but I'd like a little bit more ability to kind of think about that through myself.
That's really great feedback in terms of understanding kind of what all these different strands of work are and how we'll get updates. And I think as I've gotten oriented to this work too, that's been kind of my task as well, as like, how do I communicate this to folks? And I finally feel almost like I'm like, okay, I've got a solid sense of what we're going on here now that I've had a chance to like map it all out. So what I'm hearing would be helpful is perhaps for our progress updates for our quarterly meetings, I can send like a staff memo to you all of like, here's kind of some significant change, like progress updates or points of clarification I would like to bring to the surface or elevate to get some specific feedback on, if that would be helpful. And then I'll make sure to flag them in the actual kind of dashboard as well by having it be that like needs verification, clarification, or kind of barrier indicator. I can also have a process for flagging new additions to the dashboard. Currently, everything is really colorful because that helps me interpret big spreadsheets, but I can also make it slightly less colorful to have things stand out. Charity, you're giving me the like, no, colorful is good.
I like the way it looks. It looks good.
Okay.
I think like it gives a really good broad definition, and maybe I'm just articulating some of my own ignorance.
Oh yeah, no,
Right?
this is great. This is awesome. This is super
Yes,
helpful.
I think the colors are great. Just maybe a legend as to what they mean would be good. And maybe it's as simple as you just having a color for everything pink is new, a change, you
Yeah.
know, or something that's like easy
Yeah.
for us to see. I don't want to make more work for you. I just want to be able to know where best to spend my time.
No,
And
that makes a lot of
reviewing.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. And I want this to be a usable document. So for the work that we put into it, the idea of people actually looking at it and gaining something from it is very exciting to me. So this is all really helpful feedback. So a legend sounds like that would be helpful. And then maybe a memo to kind of direct where you can spend some attention, as well as like supporting documents, as that makes sense. And then perhaps kind of at the beginning of this year, this term of this committee, I did a kind of orientation for the committee where I went through like a line by line, like this is what this policy is. And that was really, I thought, that was just kind of a way to ground everybody, like but now we know more context of like, oh, this is what this actually means, as well as myself, just transparently, now that I've been here longer than like a handful of months. And so we've been learning together, which is great. And so what sounds like it might be helpful would be to do, perhaps instead of like a summer quarterly meeting, we could do like a summer retreat of sorts, even where we could spend some time together, however, whatever that looks like, where I could actually go through like each pillar and talk about sort of how this work is being approached and kind of what all these different strands are and where we're at with this, but also really dig into what I'm really excited about, which is like, how can the climate crisis response, climate justice, and sustainable practices policy, for instance, be a strategy for our board goals of advancing student achievement, and you really contribute to the graduate portrait, and really just see how all of this is in alignment. This work, like how is decarbonization a strategy for student achievement? And I can make the argument that there's like a direct line there, but I think that that is something that holistically can be better communicated, like, within the district operations, even ourselves. And so I think that that's a real opportunity. And so if that would be helpful for like a kind of a summer reorienting meeting or what have you, we could do that as well. And I only say summer because the next month is going to be a lot. So I think that would be helpful. So, yeah.
Just show of hands, do folks think that would be helpful? Something that you'd be interested in doing? Okay.
Did you want the virtual show of hands or the like physical show of hands? Sorry.
How about you, Diane? Did you have any comments or questions on the dashboard you wanted to share?
No, I think it's an amazing tool, and obviously still under development and evolving rapidly. I do feel like it's going to be really helpful. Especially, I appreciate Charity's question and Angela's question. I think to me it kind of speaks to how much is this tool ready to really share with the public? Is there going to be an iteration maybe down the road that is more kind of general public friendly? I don't want to really raise a whole bunch of that right now, but I will just say that in our subcommittee, and I definitely owe you all an apology for not making the last meeting, because I know I was supposed to report out on engagement, but in our one and only meeting around engagement, there was discussion. Eric, Isaac, and I got together. There was some discussion about the dashboard and kind of hopes of it being a tool that could be shared broadly. So yeah, I think it looks great.
Yes, that is one of my, I really appreciate that idea too of like, how do we make this really accessible from the public perspective? At the last board meeting, it was brought up the idea that all the work that we're doing, even at the board level and with the budget, and I think this applies to this policy, should be explainable to a third grader. Like I should be able to walk into a third grade classroom and say like, this is the cool work we're doing. And so that's one of my goals too over the summer is to bring in some high school interns and, you know, be like, hey, let's make some great communication materials and kind of like, you know, collaborate with our students on how they would like to receive this information too. Because I think I can get a little disconnected and technical. And so I'm excited also for sharing this with you all to get your feedback on those things as well. So yeah, we've got big plans. So, but excited and excited to hear that this is a priority.
Kat, if you need help with that, just so you know, like one of the things I do in my professional life is translate very technical information to non-technical audiences and make sure that there's a human design to the work that we do. So I would love to help if you need support.
I will take you up on that. That sounds great.
Same here. That's
Oh, great.
Many hours of that.
Excellent.
I had a few like specific comments, Kat, that I can share just offline by email, just some ideas of things that you could maybe add or
Sure. Yeah.
And then also I think there's a few areas kind of tagging onto what Charity was saying. There's a few areas that I would love to dig into a little bit more in the committee for like future meetings.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So, but yeah, I thought, I think it's like, I was really impressed by seeing all this information together here, and it gave me like a better sense of what's happening, way better, and like
That's
a
good.
lot more confidence about the policy work happening. And there's tons of like good foundational stuff here. So yeah, thanks for pulling that together for us.
Absolutely.
I mean, I know it's been in under draft, but I feel like this is a big step forward in this version.
It feels like a better representation for you all of what we've been doing, which I felt like has been it's been feeling like a lacking from my personal area of like, how do I communicate this? And so I appreciate all of your patience as I've been kind of digging through many iterations of how to like, how do we bring this all together? But I think it's headed in a good direction, and I just appreciate your thought partnership. Also, there's the tiniest little.
It was just so I can make notes.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I was like, can you even
dinosaur,
see
and
it?
I print paper now and then. to,
Oh, I
like,
do too.
look
I
at.
I work better from paper, but just for online perspective, Jane has the whole dashboard printed onto these like tiniest
Yeah.
like size 4 font. I was
Yeah,
like, oh my
I can
gosh.
barely-
Yeah, but anyways, so great.
any other thoughts on the dashboard before we move to another topic? All right, and let's move on to, and Kat, is there any public comment today?
I did not receive any emails for that.
We do have one member of the public in the.
One member of the public attending, okay.
Mhm.
So we have the subcommittees next and then emerging topics, and I know there's like 2 things anyway that were on my mind for emerging topics for shorter items. So in terms of subcommittees, I was hoping we could get a report from each of the 4, although I'd say for our dashboard committee, Eric and Isaac and I, there's nothing new to report. Kat's done all the work, and we just heard all about it in this document. So thanks, Kat. And hopefully you'll lean on us as if
Absolutely.
helpful
Yeah,
as we go forward.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, as it gets developed, or as there's ways of like communicating that out to the larger
Yeah.
committee, maybe that's part of what we take a look at.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I know Barbie's on is it Barbie and Diane that are doing the budget subcommittee?
We did talk about doing it, and we have not met, so there's nothing to report there.
Okay. And did you want to speak to the community engagement? I mean, we touched on it a little bit a few minutes ago.
Yeah, so Eric, Isaac and I did meet prior to our, I think it was just the Monday or Tuesday right before our last meeting. Again, I apologize for missing the last meeting, the March meeting, but we did meet and discussed. I would say that I think both of our student participants were very interested in that committee and were unable to attend. I ended up feeling a little bit restless about, struggling to include them. And so I think that, while Isaac, Eric, and I had a very good, robust conversation, and I do have notes to share, I'm a little bit unclear, I would say, about how to proceed. I think everybody has really very legitimate reasons for not having time. It's not like the folks on this committee are not busy. Obviously they are, running for office and things like that. But yeah, I am kind of feeling like we need to maybe take a few steps back and think about what is logistically feasible in order to really make this committee functional and address the primary mission of it or primary objective of it. Yeah, so I will be sharing those notes. I can share them after this meeting. I should have sent them out already, honestly, so I apologize for that.
Okay, well, that sounds great, Diane. Does anybody have thoughts about it? Sounds like Diane's wondering how to proceed. Like, did you want some feedback on that, or do you want to just take that back to the subcommittee members? Or
I think I would love an opportunity to like engage the entire committee in a conversation around it, because I think it's kind of fundamental. Yeah, and it's like I don't know that we can really go very far as a subcommittee without some better parameters on like how to be thinking about engagement when it's really challenging. At least at this juncture, I see it as very challenging. Seeing this dashboard starting to gel gives me a sense that maybe that's really where we need to put the emphasis in engaging the community. But like frontline communities are highlighted in that tool, and I'm not exactly sure really like what does that mean in terms of actual community engagement. I think that's where we would like to see the subcommittee really being able to dig in. And yeah, I don't know, there's some gaps there. So I would like to be able to discuss in a more dedicated fashion with the whole committee how we might tackle that. I just feel like we're going to run into, like Eric was mentioning, unintended consequences. We'll like run into them right away, I think, if we don't do a little bit more thinking about how to be functional around this question.
so should we plan to have a discussion about it at the May meeting? Or like, is that too soon? Or
I think it might be too soon, honestly. Because I do see other pieces coming forward. Eric, feel free to jump in, or anybody else should jump in with comments. But I kind of feel like we're at such a nascent stage that I'm not sure that we're we're really ready to discuss it, but I could be wrong. And certainly if there's time in the May meeting, it would be good.
One thing that came up when we were discussing was related to, like, Kat, you're already doing a bunch of work like with students, or like, I know we're going to the classrooms on some of those things or other engagements. So that would be one of the things we were talking about, is like how much of that's being done that would then drive some of the engagement work of the subcommittee. Like, would that be sort of one of the driving pillars of that we would expand on, or just help with? That was one of the pieces, because a lot of that's already being done to some degree that I've seen on your work. So that was one of like what's being done that we would add to or emphasize or highlight. That would be, I think, one of the discussion topics of that, because it's already being incorporated to some degree.
Yeah.
Right.
I really appreciate that. And I think that's something that we can provide. Sorry, use this kind of, oh, go ahead, Charity. I'll share in a minute.
So my organization, we do community engagement as like one of our pillars around climate justice and energy justice. And I think what I'm hearing, Diane, is like you could possibly use like a brainstorming or a session or like some clarity around like, what do we mean by community? What communities? We have multiple communities, right? And like, what are we prioritizing within that? Are they students? Are they families? Are they like the broader neighborhoods around a particular school? Like, there's a lot of ways we could be defining community, even within frontline communities, right? That's a broad term. So like, who are we really trying to reach? And once you know who your audience is, then what are we doing? Like, I feel like in a lot of our work, education is the first step. So what are we could be educating as a first step. What is this committee? What is this policy? We don't even necessarily have to say yet, what are the results of it? But letting people understand, like our questions here today, right? Like, what is the scope of this? That is something that, you don't need to wait on that. Like, I think if you want people to engage, people need to be understanding first. So there's a lot that could be done as to lay groundwork, right, on the policy and the work before we get to like impact or results. But it sounds like there's just, right now, it's just too broad and it's too unsure of like the scope of that work, because community engagement can be enormous or it can be really targeted depending on what you're trying to do. And that's maybe too big of an ask for our small subcommittee by yourselves. Maybe what you're kind of like, maybe I'm hearing a little bit.
Yeah, I would say you captured it precisely. Yeah. And Kat, maybe you could go ahead and respond to Eric and Charity, or however you want to think about it. But yeah, I think defining is going to be something that's maybe iterative, possibly, and maybe something that emerges. And so I do feel like it's a little premature to like dive into this until we have a few more tools and are really clear about what we're expecting of ourselves.
What I was going to offer, and maybe this is helping in defining that, is that we have a really awesome community engagement team. Shanice Clark is on that. I don't know if y'all know her, she's a rock star. And within that team, they have the community agent team, which specifically works with like linguistically isolated populations. And we also have a family engagement team that similarly kind of works with bringing families into the district and helping to bridge the barriers and like learning how the whole system operates to make sure your children are supported in their school experience. And so I wanted to offer, if it would be helpful, I could connect. A lot of that group was actually at the Climate Summit on Monday, and they heard our keynote speakers speech, which is going to be available on YouTube soon. I highly recommend everyone check it out. But really, she did such a great job, I thought, of connecting culture and identity and social justice and racial equity to like the systems of oppression that contribute to climate change and how we can, this is all this like movement. Anyways, so that being said, it sparked this excitement and passion on their ends of like, how do we bring this policy and this work to like the parent university space? And how do we bring this to our families? How do we help engage our parents with like what is going on here and how to best like get involved, or different students. So that being said, I was going to offer to kind of be a bridge to help connect you with them. I've been wanting to connect better with them too, just in my work of trying to understand like where we can. I think this has all been a similar process where it's like, I want to understand what I'm saying before I go and like tell people about it, because you can do harm if you're not like intentional and clear about what you're trying to communicate. Yeah, whenever that feels like a good spot, I think they would be really excited to meet with this committee, especially as, parents and students, and kind of hear like how folks might want to, come to the spaces that they're organizing already, or what new spaces they could help bring together around this.
It's also, I think, to remember, depending again on how defining community, adult education is really different than like traditional education, right? So it's just, or like students. Adult education has its own subfield and its own way that you would do things, and that's like often what you would use with the parents or whatever. It's like just different. And I have a lot of resources on energy and whatnot for adult education. So like, how do we partner with groups that have that already and already doing that? So like, would be really interesting to look at that. There are other groups out there doing a lot of this kind of work, to like, if it would help, right? Like, because adult education is just different.
Yeah.
So in terms of like, then the next.
I have one comment. I think it might be good to start with the pillars. There's, looking through that as a group and figuring out what types of things we would want to do outreach and engagement on. Like, what type of things are really providing education? What types of things do we want your engagement and feedback on? I'm sure that there'll be things that we are not going to be able to take feedback on because they're just like, they're required. I'll just give the example Kat gave before, which is the school's not going to buy an emitting resource. Like, that's not, we don't need engagement on that. But need to inform, right, and provide education about some of those things. So if we could start with that, like going through the policy and identifying those key things, and then we could target, like, here's some audiences that we think would be really useful. These are students, these are community members. That might be a good start as a group for us. And then we could take that kind of framework that we've built and share it with communities to refine it further as we go. Or any of the resources that Kat and others mentioned too. But it would be a good starting point to get something for people to react to.
And so Angela, you're saying as a group, you mean as the subcommittee group to put that together and then like bring it to the bigger committee?
Yeah, I think that it's hard. My experience with doing community engagement work is that you could spend a lot of time ideating and not really actually getting to a place, and brainstorming and not getting to a place where you have any like concrete thing that you work on. And then it looks like you're never incorporating people's feedback because you're never walking away with something that's tangible. So kind of a best practice that I've established in working with community is just starting with something and throwing it out there, but being extremely flexible to not be stuck on that, to be like, here's just an idea. It's like a whiteboard that I've created for us to go through and help me rethink it or redesign it. And I found that to be just really fruitful for people to have a place to comment on, because that ideation part of getting started is really, it's hard sometimes. And I think we could do that work and then maintain a lot of flexibility on where it goes from there to allow communities to truly develop it.
Yeah, for context, Angela has to do stuff in really technical, hard to understand grid stuff that nobody understands. So it's like really hard. This is a little easier concepts, I hope, than what you have to work on.
I think understand, and maybe they don't always care. They're like, don't give me all the details, just tell me how we're gonna do it. Which it has good and bad, but
So for the community engagement subcommittee, then do folks feel like so it sounds like there's some ideas about going away as a subcommittee first and like having almost like a draft plan, strategy to bring to the bigger group at some point in coming months.
I mean, I think we could do that. I'm hesitant because I know that we had a big chunk of this, full committee interested, but then, it was really hard for us to meet. It was, it didn't include our students, it was just, it kind of felt like we're not at the stage yet. I don't really feel like we're at a stage yet where meeting as a subcommittee is really going to be that helpful. Also, yeah, I would recommend that we kick it to the full committee as a discussion to really think through a strategy that feels practical and workable, before we, create I mean, I'm going to say an expectation on a subcommittee to, move pieces forward that really we're not ready for.
Okay, like I'm just speaking for myself, I think I'm certainly open to that. My concerns are limited time in the full committee to have like a fruitful or like a pretty broad discussion. And I think what I heard from Angela, maybe I'm misinterpreting, but what I think it's nice to have something to respond to. So if there was like some sort of kind of really like, even if it's super high level, but something for the group to look at and respond to, could move the process along more quickly, probably, from my perspective. Any other thoughts on that?
I think it's where do we benefit from that kind of community engagement? Like, where are the questions that we have that we need to take out to the community, right? That's, I think, what Angela was getting at a bit. What are those tangible reasons that we're doing engagement? That you can do broad education, right, which has its own goal, but like, what is the question, or what are we trying to learn, or what are we trying to co-design with there's a point, because people want to feel like if they're giving their feedback or if they're involved, that it has an impact. They don't necessarily want to feel like, well, you brought some cooked thing to me and you're doing lip service to like having my opinion and nothing changes. So what are we really taking to them where we say, here's a question we have where we really need community input, or here's an area where PPS needs you to be involved to advise on some decisions or advise on some tactics or whatnot, so that it's like a real thing we're taking to people to give input on. And sometimes to do that, you have to do education so that people understand what they're giving advice on, is my experience. So that's where,
and we don't want to waste
they had
time either.
Yeah, and we don't want to wait. Correct. So if we as a group were able to fine tune that and say to the subcommittee, here's your key task, instead of this amorphous, go do outreach and figure out a plan. Like, that can be very daunting. And I'm hearing like, you don't feel, Diane, that the committee, your subcommittee, is ready for that. But if we as a group could give some direction on, here are the couple of areas we think there needs to be feedback from the broader community, or we decide as a group, we just want to educate different groups about this policy and what the overall plan is. That's a valid goal. But we haven't all decided that yet. And what does CAT, I mean, ultimately, we would want to do this because it's useful to the groups implementing this program. So where do CAT's team want this kind of feedback too?
Yeah, I think that that really hits it on the head. I think, back to Eric's question, there's probably things that CAT is doing and others that we aren't aware of, that does, we could be, you know, inventing the wheel again, basically as a subcommittee. So if we can map out what Kat's, you know, already got sort of going, and she just mentioned at least one item. Yeah, and then like focus in on where our questions are. I think that would be helpful.
Okay, I think we probably should move on to another. I know we wanted to talk about the board report subcommittee, and then there's a couple other items for the end in emerging topics. So Charity and Angela and I have been doing some work on a draft report. I know we sent around an outline a couple of weeks ago that folks responded to, and then just today, and I know we just sent it today, but I just wanted people to have a sneak peek if you wanted to click on it and see how it's evolving. And I'll let Angela and Charity talk it through a little bit, but what I was going to say is we really want the report to reflect the committee. And so, you know, we've been working as this group of 3 subcommittee, and what we kind of feel is the sentiment of the group. But of course, you know, we haven't heard from each of you, and we will make an effort to touch base with every single one of you in the next like 2 weeks, probably is all we have. So please just like be ready for that, and either by email or looking at the Google Doc, or if you'd rather have a phone conversation, I'm happy to call and chat or meet or whatever. Angela and Charity, did Angela, do you want to like walk through the document a bit, or highlight any specific areas where we're looking for key input?
Yes. So in terms of process, like Jane mentioned, you know, we're presenting our first annual report to the board in June. So we would like to have the report pretty well developed by May. So we all feel good with what we're presenting. That gives us, you know, 2 weeks to gather feedback for us to go through and refine and then provide it out again. So the process is going to move really quickly. And just want to highlight what Jane said in terms of if we need to sit down with you, or if it's better to work through email, whatever it is that we need to do to gather your feedback, we're willing to do that. The document is structured like this for just for some context. We would like the executive summary, that's the first part of the report, to highlight what's the purpose of the group and what we've accomplished this year, like major milestone being this committee was stood up, but also any key findings and recommendations that we've had over the last year. So you'll see a placeholder in the executive summary for that, because we really need input from this team to figure out what are the key things that we recommend. The other section of the report is the body of the report itself, which aligns with the charter. Jane did a really good job of going through and identifying here's the key things that we're responsible for. There are broad categories in terms of reports and data, implementation, and then findings for this group to look at. So we've taken an initial step to try to pull everything together based on agendas that Kat has put out, the meetings that we've attended, background information that Jane has, but there is still a lot that I think needs to be provided in terms of what are the key things that everybody would look for next year. And we really want our findings, I guess I'll just end with this, is that we really want our findings to be our priorities for next year. What are the key things that we are hoping to accomplish? We've spent a year now together going through this process to stand this up, and it feels like we can be actionable next year and kind of prioritize some key things. So if there's anything that you need to help you do that, like suggested to Jane and Charity that a calendar of events would be really helpful, just to know there's a climate summit coming up, or if there's a Benson meeting. It would be nice to have everything in one place. I know we have a Google Drive, but some things are agenda items and those are in email, and some things are on the dashboard, and some things are on the public website, but there's nothing that really brings it together in a way that's accessible and transparent. So if you miss a meeting, you kind of feel like there's a big gap between the last time you met and the meeting that you're in. And Diane, I don't know if you feel that way, but I missed a meeting and I felt, wow, so much has happened, and I have a huge hole in my knowledge of what this group has done. So just some way that's easy to find materials and catch up really quickly would be important. So those are kind of personal recommendations that I had, but there's also some very tangible things I'd like to see, like, how are we doing? What are we doing on the curriculum side? What does implementation look like for the buildings that we're going to be looking at? So those types of things that are within the charter that you would like to see next year, let's put those in the findings. And then in May, Jane and Charity, I'll take it over to you. But in May, my hope was, let's see how realistic some of these things are in May and refine it further and then present it to the board in June. The hope there. And it doesn't have to be pretty. Oh, sorry, one thing, Jane. You do not have to be the best writer in the world. You can just throw bullet points in there or comments. Don't worry if you're a data person. Don't worry about that. We have strong writers between Jane and I think.
And just
and Charity too. Sorry, Charity.
On the timeline, Angela, just to clarify, we're going to need to vote on the report at the May meeting. So we just have a month, these 4 weeks between now and then, and when we post the agenda and when do we need to have that, like the public agenda with the background documents?
But it needs to go out for public notice 3 full days before,
Okay,
I believe. It might be. I usually try and get it posted by the Friday before the meeting.
Okay.
But they can take it on like the Monday as well. But the earlier is nice. So
Okay.
just to give people time for it.
Sorry, and now over to you, Charity. I just wanted to make sure that we were clear on the timing.
Yeah, I think you guys have all explained it. I'm actually glad that we've had this meeting too today to get more information before we finalize it, because I feel like some of the things we were highlighting in the report, I feel a little better about after having spent so much time talking about the dashboard today.
So out of curiosity, is the report recommendations to the board on, I'm just curious maybe about that, but I can find out more by looking at the.
I mean, I think that the audience for this report is the board.
Okay.
Because that's how our charter's written. But the board's not going to do anything.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I was taking notes of oh yeah, those are tasks and administrative things that I think my team would probably be working on. And so that's where I was so that's why I was trying to understand where
I think it's because
because it goes, obviously the goal of the committee is to report to the board on progress. And so that's where I'm curious
and
to
the
see how that
committee
plays out.
doesn't direct staff work.
Yeah.
So we can only say, hey, board, this is where we think priorities should be. And then it's up to the board to say to staff, these are the priorities,
Okay.
So I think that's sort of
One thing I should highlight, and I think it's important to be transparent, but I personally feel, and Charity and Jane, feel free to say if you don't agree with this, but you are one person leading an innovative, groundbreaking policy, and there is a lot to be done to meet the to go at the pace of climate change. And so while there's some quick wins of developing a calendar and things like that we could recommend to the board, the truth, as I see it, is that there really needs to be a commitment from senior leadership and a dedication of staff to support you on this. So that's the recommendation. If I could get anything out of the report, is here's all these things that are not getting done because we have one person who is responsible for something that is, quite frankly, ginormous. And so that would be my takeaway, I guess. Jane and Charity, feel free to say differently.
I think that's really important to clarify, is like any recommendations we make is not because, you know, we don't feel like you're putting in all the effort. It's like we see the need for more, more cloning of cat.
I appreciate framing it that way, because that to me,
Cloning of cats, so cat can herd the cat.
I love that the Zoom it's all just cat with a C this entire time. And so the captions. So I think that's great. But no, that framing is helpful for me, because I was like, wait, how does this go from here to there? And now I'm saying like, oh, because the board directs the goals of the district. And so better being able to elevate for the whole board, like this is something that we need to really think about from the district and the leadership side of things. That's really helpful. Thank you for framing it for me. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. So
yeah, I think that's part of our job as a committee, is to keep the pressure on and shine a light on this policy and the need to keep it resourced with staff and money and creative and doing that. Hopefully we can be helpful.
Yeah. And I'm hopeful that as we can even better articulate how this work so directly connects to the board goals, they'll be able to see it as a strategy versus, oh, we want student achievement. And then this climate thing over here is also important, where we know that hands-on, tangible, culturally relevant, developmentally appropriate, contextualized learning that climate science and climate justice and climate resilience things can help elevate and understand a student's connection to science and math and reading and all those things as well. So that's what I'm excited about too, as we get from this last year of just frantic mapping what is going on stage, and we all kind of better understand what's going on. I think that's where we have the real fun stuff comes in. So maybe it's just the outside. I don't know.
You just articulated the entire philosophy of Sunnyside Environmental School.
Yes. That was my second day here at PPS. I went to Sunnyside. It was so great. I had third graders show me their climate justice, roadmap, their own climate plans. And I was like, what am I here? You all are already doing it. And so that was so cool. Yeah, absolutely.
Any other comments on the board report? Okay. Okay, for the last item, I want to, the two things that I wanted to talk about. One was the awesome youth climate summit that Kat and Hannah and other folks at PPS staff organized. Angela and Eric and I got a chance to attend, and it was so awesome. It was such a great event. Yeah, I thought it was wonderful. Do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Sure. Oh my gosh, absolutely. It was amazing, and huge shout out to you all for coming and volunteering. That was so great to have. Just really quickly, Angela brought 5 people as volunteers too, which was so awesome and super helpful, because we had a big
I felt a little pushy about that, Kat, but I was like, everybody on my team needs to come.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. Honestly, it was so helpful. So for context, we had about 300 high school students, mostly from PPS, as well as a few from out of district, join us on Monday for a day of what we called inspiration and leadership skills development, and trying to really center and ground in the message of how there's so many pathways and important pieces of climate action. The science aspect of it is really important in understanding that, but really connecting to culture and the arts and just all of the ways that you can get engaged with this movement. So we had brought in, so I came here to PPS from Boise State University. And so I had gotten connected with this really great high school student there, Shiva Rajbandare, who's got national news because he ran for the school board, and there's not student positions on that school board. So he ran against an incumbent school board member and got on the school board, and is a climate activist in the area. So he came and spoke about climate action and how inspired he was about PPS students, which was really a cool message, and just how the work that we're doing here gives students in places that do not have this as a cultural norm, the hope and the ability to see what they could do, which was really sweet. And then we also had Fabiana Rodriguez come, who's an awesome climate art, social justice activist. She's just amazing. And we have all of these speeches and keynotes on video, so we're going to upload them to our YouTube. So if you all want to go check it out. The students engaged in an art activity. And I can actually share with you their photo drive where it has all the pictures of the students and their art, these like really like just vibrant, beautiful art pieces. I'm hoping to get them actually put up in the central office downstairs. We have like big walls for art.
Really cool.
And they were made with like black poster board with like bright neon cutouts and like just really cool. So it would bring some necessary color to this building, which would be great. Yeah, and then we had breakout sessions in the afternoon where students could learn about PSEF and the work that their city is doing and how to get directly involved and like how that work relates to them in like civic engagement style. We had Our Future come talk about like the importance of coalition building and what that work could look like within their schools and then across the district. And then I did a breakout on that. I've done, my background in research is in climate anxiety and like how to help students. Basically I call it like imagine a future worth fighting for, since that's a real struggle, especially for students. I was working directly with college students, but also like our high school students and younger are facing that in like an even more severe way. So that was my breakout, was a real quick like intro to that work. Yeah, so it was great. And we'll definitely, I love the idea of an events calendar. So I'm hoping to put on, that was the idea of this, was to just like plant the seed of this kind of how this work could conceptualize at the district. And then I learned recently about Spokane School District has a climate youth advisory that advises their board on climate related issues. And we've been talking about building out the climate justice youth advisory again. That used to be an iteration at PPS. And so that was, I'm excited to see how this could this event could translate to that further pathways for action. Yeah, and then also provide more professional development for teachers around all this, because the like teachers were like, yes, like this is what we needed. So that was kind of a long synopsis, but I'll share the folders with the videos and the pictures with you all, because that'll give you a little boost of warm and fuzzies. They're good stuff. So yeah,
It was awesome.
It was amazing. And her Kat presented, her presentation was awesome. And I've used Kat. I walked away from your presentation, even though I'm horrible. I learned I'm a horrible timekeeper. So that's an area of growth for me. But I have been telling everybody about language and how important it is to talk about climate justice and climate change and environmental justice in a way that's positive and just, I mean, I've read that's resonated with me so much, how what a heavy burden our youth have to carry, and that's something I've tried to change. So thank you for that, Kat.
yeah. And there is a whole philosophical like rabbit hole that Hannah helped me not go into, and I was putting out I was like, is this too much? And she's like, 40 minutes. So thank you for that, for the editing tips. But if y'all ever want any kind of resources on that, it's something I get really excited about and happy to share. So
the other thing that I wanted to touch on, make sure we talked about, is that we need to recruit 2 new students. So the student terms and like May will be Danny and Richard's last meeting. And I don't know like what role we can play in helping to recruit students, or like, do you feel good about that process? What can we do to help?
yeah, so interestingly, I was not here for the like that all happened right before I got here. I got my first day, they were like, here's all of the applications for this committee and here's this policy and go. And so I would love if anyone wants to help think about application questions and criteria for reviewing applications. That's something that I think would be great if just folks have, just from the experience of being on the committee, kind of what we're looking for from students that might want to be engaged, and yeah, and then help disseminating it to your different communities would be awesome. So we have a good like, reach. So yeah, and I can in that, if anyone is interested in that, I can share the questions from last year.
Yeah, maybe you could circulate like that, and then the key questions that you would like input on.
Yeah.
That would be helpful.
Definitely. And I'd love to get that out while people are still in school. So I'm
Yeah.
realizing that has to happen pretty soon.
You did
So,
give a shout out about
Is it any grade?
I mean, it's,
Any grade,
yeah,
any?
the charter doesn't specify the age range. So we had applicants all the way down to like 8 years old. So in the last process,
really.
which was sweet. So yeah. And it's so hard because we have a lot of really active students too. So that was a hard thing too, where we've got like a lot of, just balancing out like where are like, and it's only two, that's where I think having a whole other committee as well of like students would be really,
Mhm.
really great to be able to capture, because folks who haven't been able to be engaged yet or are just new to the space versus like people who have been really engaged. There's a lot of value in both perspectives, and
Yeah.
I can't remember, did they have the same application?
Mhm.
as we did?
they did. Yeah.
I should also add that Julia Brim Edwards, Director Brim Edwards, sends her apologies for missing tonight. There was again a PPS board meeting, a policy committee meeting, I think it was, that was scheduled for the same time as our meeting. So she is still, around and supporting us, but she's also running for a county commission seat right now. And Danny Cage is running for a MESD seat.
Very cool.
Any other topics? Those were mine that I wanted to make sure we got to. Anybody else have something to add? Okay, well, maybe we can end 5 minutes early. Thanks everybody for coming out tonight. Good to see everybody. Hope you enjoy some sunshine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.